Have you ever noticed that even while praying, reading the Bible and trying to do everything right, there is a kind of exhaustion that doesn't go away? A constant weight on your mind, as if you have to anticipate problems, prevent mistakes, protect everyone, and make sure nothing slips out of control? What if I told you that you may not be spiritually weak? You may simply be carrying something that was never your responsibility. In this video, you will understand why your spiritual exhaustion may have nothing to do with a lack of faith, hidden sin, or a direct attack, but rather with an invisible pattern of excessive control that is draining your energy from the inside out. We're going to expose how this control disguises itself as responsibility, how it affects your peace, and most importantly, how you can realign your posture to recover real rest, mental clarity, and emotional stability. If you feel exhausted even while doing everything right, if you feel the need to keep everything under constant watch, or if you struggle to turn your mind off even when you're physically still, this video is for you. Stay until the end, because the change you need may not be to do more, but to release what was never yours to carry. Before we move forward, an important note. This video was created with the help of artificial intelligence tools. They assist us in organizing ideas, structuring the content, and bringing clarity to the arguments. But the reflection you're about to hear is deeply human, because it speaks about something many people are living through in silence. Now let's begin. You feel tired, but it's not just physical exhaustion. It's something deeper. You sleep, yet wake up as if your mind never truly shut off. You pray, but remain in a constant state of alert. You read the Bible, yet the weight doesn't lift. There is a steady tension, as if something could slip out of control at any moment. In Matthew 11:28-30, Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." Notice that he does not speak only of physical rest. He speaks of rest for the soul. That reveals that there is a kind of exhaustion that cannot be solved by external pause but by internal realignment. Maybe you are doing everything right. You fulfill responsibilities, help people, maintain spiritual commitments, and try to anticipate problems. But there is a difference between healthy responsibility and silent overload. When you begin to feel that you must foresee everything, fix everything, and sustain everything, something shifts inside you. The weight stops being circumstantial and becomes structural. This kind of exhaustion is usually accompanied by constant vigilance. Your mind creates scenarios before they happen. You imagine possible failures. You try to prevent future mistakes. Even during moments of rest, part of you remains switched on, analyzing, planning, preventing. It doesn't look like weakness. It looks like diligence. It looks like maturity. But it may be a sign of accumulated spiritual exhaustion. There is also guilt attached to resting. When you try to slow down, an internal voice asks, "Have you done enough?" Even when everything appears to be in order, you feel like you should be doing something more. This inability to relax does not come from a lack of faith. Often it comes from the silent belief that if you lower your guard, something will fall apart. Physical tiredness improves with sleep. Emotional fatigue improves with conversation. But spiritual exhaustion persists even when circumstances improve. You can take a vacation and still feel restless. You can solve one problem and immediately begin worrying about the next. That reveals that the root is not external. It lies in the internal posture you adopted without realizing it. Jesus did not invite the weary to learn better management techniques. He invited them to exchange yokes. A yoke represents burden, direction, and pace. When you take on burdens that were never assigned to you, the pace becomes heavy. When you try to sustain what was never placed in your hands, your soul moves into overload. Perhaps your exhaustion is not the result of hidden sin. Perhaps it is not a direct spiritual attack. Perhaps it is the consequence of an invisible pattern you adopted over time. A pattern that blends responsibility with control. A pattern that keeps you functioning, but drained on the inside. The problem is that responsible people rarely collapse. They keep delivering. They keep serving. They keep sustaining. On the outside, everything looks solid. On the inside, silent wear is building. And the more strength you display externally, the less you notice the tension accumulating internally. Jesus promised rest for the soul, not just temporary relief. If you have not yet experienced that rest, it does not mean he failed. It may mean that something is misaligned in the way you are carrying your life. And before we talk about control, we need to understand why you keep functioning even while exhausted. You keep functioning. That's the part that creates confusion. Because if you are still producing, solving, helping, and keeping everything in order, how could you be spiritually exhausted? The fact that you haven't collapsed creates the illusion that everything is fine. But functioning is not the same as being healthy. Performance is not the same as inner peace. Some people break down when they are overloaded. They stop. They fall apart. They show clear signs of burnout. But you are not like that. You continue. You adapt. You absorb more weight. You reorganize priorities. And externally, everything appears under control. Internally, however, the wear advances quietly, almost unnoticed. You learned how to operate under pressure. You learned to solve issues before they grow. You learned to sustain environments, people, and responsibilities. That ability is admirable, but when it becomes constant, it begins to consume energy that is never fully restored. You become efficient, but progressively drained. In 2 Corinthians 12:9, Paul recounts something that confronts this logic of continuous performance. He says the Lord told him, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Notice that God did not exalt Paul's self-sufficiency. He did not celebrate his ability to endure everything alone. He revealed that true strength is born from dependence, not from constant resistance. When you confuse endurance with spiritual maturity, you begin to value your ability to handle everything. You quietly take pride in never stopping, in never showing fragility, in always managing. But strength that is poorly managed turns into overload, and constant overload becomes invisible exhaustion, layering itself over time. There is a difference between being sustained by God and trying to sustain everything for God. In the first case, you act with confidence. In the second, you act with tension. In the first, there is lightness even in challenges. In the second, there is rigidity, constant vigilance, and a need to anticipate every possible mistake. Many responsible people learned early on that they cannot fail, that they must foresee others' mistakes, that they must compensate for weaknesses around them. This pattern settles quietly and begins shaping your spirituality. You pray, but still try to guarantee the outcome. You surrender to God, yet keep parallel plans as emotional insurance. The issue is not being strong. The issue is never allowing yourself to depend. When strength becomes identity, any sign of weakness feels threatening. And so you work more, pray more, organize more, monitor more. Not because God demanded it, but because you fear what might happen if you relax. God did not ask for constant performance. He did not design spirituality around uninterrupted productivity. Grace is not fuel for you to run faster. It is foundation for you to walk steadily. If your faith feels like a permanent state of alert, that reveals a misalignment between effort and trust. Perhaps you are using your capability as a shield. As long as you keep functioning, you avoid facing the internal wear. As long as you keep solving problems, you don't have to admit you are tired. But ignoring exhaustion does not remove it. It only postpones it until it begins affecting your clarity, your joy, and your spiritual sensitivity. There is a kind of strength that is sustainable because it is rooted in conscious dependence. And there is a kind of strength that depletes because it is rooted in the silent attempt to keep everything under control. The first produces peace under pressure. The second produces tension even when everything appears stable. If you are still functioning while exhausted, we need to look beyond external behavior. We need to examine the internal structure that keeps you in constant motion. Because the root may not simply be excessive effort. It may be something deeper, more structural, more invisible, something that looks like responsibility, but operates as control. There may be a silent sentence that has been governing you for a long time. If I don't do it, no one will. It sounds like responsibility. It sounds like maturity. It sounds like commitment. But it may be hiding something deeper. It may reveal a posture that has crossed the healthy boundary of responsibility and entered the territory of control. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and He will make your path straight. This is not just a beautiful spiritual suggestion, it is a structural adjustment. It directly confronts the tendency to rely on your own ability as your primary security system. Control disguised as responsibility happens when you do your part and try to do God's part as well. You act, but you also try to guarantee the outcome. You plan, but you also try to predict every variable. You trust, but you keep a margin of self-protection in case things don't unfold as expected. This shows up in the constant need to anticipate scenarios. Your mind rehearses conversations before they happen. You calculate possible reactions. You create preventive strategies for mistakes that may never occur. That state of anticipation looks like prudence, but when it becomes permanent, it turns into accumulated tension. It also appears in the difficulty of delegating. Even when someone else could take on a task, you feel the need to supervise, review, or step in, not because you completely distrust them, but because you feel responsible for making sure everything turns out right. That need to make sure reveals where your security truly rests. Control also infiltrates your relationship with time. You try to accelerate processes. You want answers quickly. You want resolution before uncertainty lingers too long. Waiting feels uncomfortable because it demands active trust. And active trust means surrendering the need to dominate every step of the process. There is also the attempt to control spiritual outcomes. You pray for someone, yet you also try to direct every decision they make. You ask God for guidance, yet internally you have already decided what the path should be. This mixture of faith and self-control creates invisible tension. You say you trust, but you continue carrying the weight. The difference between doing your part and assuming God's role is subtle, but decisive. Doing your part involves obedient action. Assuming God's role involves trying to sustain what is beyond your reach. When you cross that line, your energy begins to drain, not because of the work itself, but because of the attempt to guarantee outcomes. Partial trust is one of the most common forms of this pattern. It is not the absence of faith, it is divided faith. Part of your heart rests in God. Another part remains on alert, ready to intervene if things do not follow the desired script. That divided state produces constant exhaustion. The most dangerous part is that all of this can look like spiritual zeal. It can look like commitment. It can look like leadership. But internally, you feel the weight. You feel that you cannot switch off. You feel that you must always stay alert. If this message is bringing clarity to you, subscribe to the channel now. Here, we do not offer superficial formulas, but insights that realign internal structures and strengthen your spiritual maturity. Your journey requires stability, not just momentary motivation, because as long as control continues operating under the disguise of responsibility, rest will remain distant. And before we talk about how to release it, we need to understand the invisible cost of continuing to carry what was never placed in your hands. There is a price almost no one notices when living in constant control. It does not appear dramatically. It does not necessarily create a visible crisis. It manifests as a permanent state of alertness, as if your mind is always a few steps ahead, calculating risks, predicting failures, anticipating scenarios. Psalm 127, 1-2 declares, "Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. In vain you rise early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat, for he grants sleep to those he loves." This text is direct. There is a type of effort that becomes futile, not because the work is wrong, but because vigilance has taken a place that belongs to God. Control creates a state of spiritual hypervigilance. You pray, yet you continue monitoring. You plan, yet you keep reviewing mentally. You decide, yet you remain testing alternative scenarios. Your mind does not rest because it believes relaxing is risky, and that constant alertness quietly consumes energy. Mental simulations become routine. Before a conversation, you rehearse responses. Before a project, you imagine possible failures. Before a decision, you calculate negative consequences. It looks like strategic prudence, but when it never stops, it becomes sophisticated anxiety, organized, logical, yet still draining. The cost also appears in the inability to experience deep rest. Even when there is no real crisis, your body remains tense. Your thoughts stay active. You may be sitting still, but internally you are still working. That is why vacations do not always restore you. The environment changes, but the internal pattern remains. There is accumulated emotional drainage that you may have already normalized. Small tensions repeated throughout the day, small internal alerts, small anticipatory worries. None of them seem serious on their own, but together they build a constant state of overload. This pattern also creates a false sense of indispensability. If you are always monitoring, always preventing, always adjusting, you begin to believe that your vigilance is what keeps everything functioning. That belief reinforces the cycle. The more you control, the more you believe you must continue controlling. But the psalm is clear. Rising early and going to bed late does not guarantee stability if the Lord is not sustaining it. There is an invisible boundary where effort stops being cooperation and becomes a silent usurpation of role. And when you try to occupy that space, the consequence is not only physical fatigue, it is progressive spiritual wear. Control also robs spiritual sensitivity. When your mind is constantly occupied with forecasts and adjustments, it becomes difficult to perceive subtle direction. You become efficient, but less sensitive, functional, but less light, responsible, but less rested. The invisible cost is not only energy, it is joy, it is spontaneity, it is clarity. It is the ability to trust without needing to have every answer in advance. And the longer you sustain this pattern, the more distant the promised rest appears. If you are recognizing this pattern in yourself, subscribe to the channel now. This space is for those who desire real spiritual maturity, not just momentary encouragement. Here, we confront internal structures that drain your peace and offer practical paths to restore stability. Because before we talk about how to let go, we must look at the emotional root that feeds this control, and it is usually connected to something deeper than simple responsibility. If you look inward with honesty, you may realize that control does not come only from responsibility. It comes from fear. Fear that something will go wrong. Fear that you will fail. Fear of disappointing the people who trust you. Fear of losing stability that took years to build. And this fear rarely presents itself dramatically. It operates quietly, consistently, almost rationally. Psalm 56:3 says, "When I am afraid, I put my trust in you." Notice that the text does not deny the existence of fear. It acknowledges that fear comes. Life brings unpredictable situations, pressure, and real risks. The difference lies in the response. Fear can lead to control, or it can lead to trust. And often, without realizing it, you chose control as a way to reduce the anxiety fear produces. Control is a sophisticated self-protection mechanism. If I anticipate everything, I reduce risks. If I monitor everything, I avoid surprises. If I take responsibility for every detail, I decrease the chance of failure. That logic sounds prudent and even mature, but it carries an implicit message. I must guarantee that nothing goes wrong, because if it does, the consequences will be unbearable. The fear of failure is one of the strongest drivers of this pattern. You don't want to make mistakes because you associate failure with loss of value. You don't want to fall short because you believe your identity is tied to your performance. So you compensate, you work harder, you monitor more, you plan more, you revisit decisions, you adjust routes before they are even necessary, and little by little, your energy is consumed by constant prevention. There's also the fear of disappointing others. When people depend on you, family, church, team, friends, the emotional weight increases. You feel that you must maintain stability for everyone, that you must be the reference point, that you cannot show fragility. Even if no one explicitly demands it, that expectation begins to govern your internal decisions. The fear of losing stability is even more subtle. Perhaps you have experienced seasons of disorder in the past. Maybe you went through chaos, losses, or deep frustration. And almost unconsciously, your heart established a rule. I will never allow that to happen again. Control then stops being just a strategy. It becomes a personal promise of self-protection. The problem is that this promise is never enough. No matter how much you plan, anticipate, and monitor, there will always be variables outside your reach. And when you try to cover them all, you enter a permanent state of tension. You may prevent some mistakes, but you cannot prevent the emotional wear that accumulates over time. Trust requires vulnerability. Trusting God means accepting that you do not control every outcome. It means admitting that there are factors that do not depend on your vigilance. It means surrendering the illusion of absolute guarantee, and that surrender is uncomfortable because it touches the very fear you have been trying to manage on your own. Real faith begins where control ends. As long as you keep everything under constant internal supervision, your trust remains partial. You believe, but you still hold back. You surrender, but with reservations. You pray, yet you continue mentally carrying the outcome. That inner division generates exhaustion because you live between two systems: declared dependence and active self-protection. God does not ignore your fear. He does not condemn your attempt to protect yourself. But He also does not call you to live in a permanent state of emotional alertness. He calls you to trust, even when there are no visible guarantees. He calls you to rest, even when circumstances are not fully resolved. That requires deeper courage than control ever will. Perhaps your exhaustion is not only physical or mental. Perhaps it is emotional. The fatigue of sustaining fears that were never fully surrendered. The wear of maintaining a constant defensive posture toward life. The ongoing effort to guarantee what only God can truly sustain. As long as fear continues to feed control, rest will remain distant. And this is exactly where a loving confrontation becomes necessary. Not to accuse you, but to reposition your trust and redefine the place fear occupies within you. Now we reach a decisive point. Because after identifying the fear, recognizing the pattern, and seeing the accumulated wear, an inevitable question arises. What if you are trying to occupy a place that was never yours? Not out of conscious arrogance, but out of habit. Not out of rebellion, but out of misdirected responsibility. Sometimes control does not come from obvious pride, but from a sincere attempt to keep everything stable. Isaiah 26:3 declares, "You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast, because they trust in you." The peace described here is not the absence of challenges. It is not the guarantee that nothing will go wrong. It is the result of correct focus, of an adjusted mind, of repositioned trust. This means that the absence of peace is not always a lack of faith. Sometimes it is excessive control occupying the space of trust. God did not delegate the control of the future to you. He did not assign you the responsibility of sustaining final outcomes. He did not place on your shoulders the obligation to guarantee absolute stability in every area of your life and in the lives of those around you. When you attempt to assume that role, even with good intentions, you create a tension your spirit was never designed to carry. Control feels like security. It creates a sense of organization. It gives the impression of mastery. It makes you feel as though you are preventing problems before they arise. But security based on control is fragile because it depends on your ability to foresee everything and respond perfectly to every surprise. Trust, on the other hand, produces internal stability even while external variables remain in motion. Perhaps your exhaustion is a sign of misalignment, not spiritual failure. An internal alert telling you that you are sustaining something beyond your measure. And the hardest part is admitting it, because you built your identity around strength, competence, and reliability. You learned to be the one who solves, the one who stabilizes, the one who carries. There is a loving confrontation happening here, not to diminish your responsibility, but to redefine your limits. You were called to act with faithfulness, not to sit on the throne of control. You were called to obey consistently, not to guarantee every outcome. There is a difference between being diligent and dominating circumstances. When you try to control everything, you live in tension. Even when nothing is wrong, you remain ready to fix something. When you trust fully, you live in stability. That does not mean passivity. It does not mean negligence. It means acting where you have responsibility and resting where you do not have authority. Often, control sneaks in as a substitute for trust. You continue doing your part, but maintain an internal vigilance that never switches off. That vigilance consumes emotional and spiritual energy. It keeps your mind active even when your body stops. And that explains why rest feels incomplete. The peace described in Isaiah is not a passing emotion. It is the result of a mind fixed on God. And a fixed mind is not a hyperactive mind. It is an aligned mind. It is a consciousness that understands what belongs to you and what belongs to the Lord. When that division becomes clear, tension decreases. When it is ignored, the weight increases. If this message is confronting something inside you, subscribe to the channel now. Here we do more than inspire. We reposition mindsets. If you desire real spiritual maturity, emotional clarity, and practical stability, this is the place to keep growing with balance and depth. Perhaps today is not the day to do more. Perhaps it is the day to recognize that you have been trying to occupy a space that was never yours to occupy. And that recognition does not weaken you. It frees you. It marks the beginning of the restoration of your spiritual energy and the rest that Jesus promised. When you finally let go, something unexpected happens. It is not a loud miracle. It is not an instant change in your circumstances. It is an internal shift, a redistribution of weight, as if something you had been carrying alone is finally placed back into the right hands. 1 Peter 5:7 says, "Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you." Notice the verb, cast. It is not manage better. It is not divide partially. It is transfer. That requires a conscious decision. It means recognizing that the anxiety you are carrying was never designed to remain under your custody. When you release control, your energy begins to return gradually, because much of your exhaustion did not come from the tasks themselves, but from the attempt to guarantee outcomes. When you let go of that function, your mind stops operating in constant anticipation mode. Clarity increases because the noise decreases. You continue doing your part. You keep working, serving, planning. The difference is that now your actions are no longer accompanied by permanent internal tension. You act responsibly without carrying the world. You engage without becoming emotionally entangled in every possible outcome. Anxiety decreases not because all problems disappear, but because the burden of guaranteeing results has been removed from your shoulders. There is a lightness that comes when you understand you do not need to foresee everything in order to be secure. Security does not come from constant vigilance. It comes from properly positioned trust. In this context, rest stops being an occasional pause and becomes a spiritual discipline. You consciously choose not to mentally revisit what you have already surrendered. You choose to interrupt unnecessary simulations. You choose to redirect thoughts when they try to reclaim control. That is practical maturity. Letting go is not passivity. It is not negligence. It is not irresponsibility. It is a boundary adjustment. You clearly define what is your part, acting with integrity, making wise decisions, fulfilling commitments, and you recognize what is not your part, controlling reactions, guaranteeing final outcomes, sustaining the future. When that division becomes clear, peace begins even before circumstances change. This is important. Stability does not depend on a perfect environment. It depends on internal alignment. And internal alignment produces serenity even in uncertainty. You begin to realize that you do not have to live in a permanent state of alert. You can plan without anxiety. You can wait without panic. You can act without exhaustion. This shift is not only emotional, it is structural. It is a repositioning of trust. There is also an impact on your spiritual sensitivity. When your mind is no longer occupied with excessive control, you perceive direction more clearly. Prayer stops being a management checklist and becomes dialogue. Bible reading stops being reinforcement and becomes guidance. If this content is helping you reorganize your internal posture, subscribe to the channel now. Here we teach principles that produce practical transformation and lasting stability. Your spiritual journey needs a solid foundation, not just moments of motivation. Because letting go is only the beginning. The real challenge is understanding that resting is also an act of obedience, not merely an emotional option. We have reached the final point of this journey, but not the end of the process. Because rest is not just a consequence of what you have learned here. Rest is a conscious spiritual choice, and more than that, it is an act of obedience. Hebrews 4:9-11 says, "There remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. Let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest." This passage reveals something profound. Rest is not laziness. It is not escape. It is not negligence. It is positioning. There is an effort involved, not to do more, but to trust correctly. You were taught that responsibility requires constant vigilance. That maturity means anticipating problems. That leadership means sustaining everything. But Scripture shows that there is a rest prepared by God, and entering it requires a decision. It requires abandoning the illusion that you must sustain what He promised to care for. Resting is also obedience because it honors God's sovereignty. When you insist on controlling everything, you communicate, even unconsciously, that your security depends more on your ability than on His faithfulness. When you rest, you declare that you trust God's character above your own projections. This does not mean challenges will disappear. It does not mean problems will not arise. It means you will not allow anxiety to become your identity. Exhaustion is not who you are. It is an alert, a signal that something was out of place. Perhaps for a long time, you believed your fatigue was a sign of weak faith. Perhaps you felt spiritually insufficient because you were still tired. But now it is clear. You are not spiritually exhausted because God stepped away. You are tired because you held on to something that was never yours to carry. There is freedom when that truth settles in. You can remain responsible without being controlling. You can stay committed without living in constant alert. You can remain faithful without trying to hold the future in your own hands. To rest is to trust. To trust is to align. To align is to obey. And obedience produces stability that does not depend on favorable circumstances. It produces peace that does not fluctuate with every external variable. Now, before we close, do something simple and quiet. Identify one specific area of your life that you have been trying to control excessively. It may be a person, a project, a future decision. Acknowledge internally that this area does not fully belong to you, and in this moment consciously place it in God's hands. No dramatics, no forced emotion, just a decision. This is the beginning of a new pattern, a pattern of mature trust, a pattern of balanced responsibility, a pattern of obedient rest. You do not need to strive harder. You need to release what was never yours to sustain.